Ladies and gentlemen, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, Republic of the Philippines, Commander-in-Chief, Armed Forces of the Philippines.
Mamuno para sa pagbabago. Sawa na ang bayan ko sa magnanakaw na tao. Madilim na kahapon, ikaw ang mag-aahon. Sa piling mo, di ko mawawala ang korupsyon.
President Rodrigo Roa Duterte.
Tayo na, Pilipinas, tayo na magbago. Hawak kamay tayo para sa pag-asenso. Ikaw at ako, tayong lahat kay Rodrigo Duterte para sa
Please be seated.
tunay na
Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you all to the celebration of the 83rd founding anniversary of the Armed Forces of the Philippines with this year's anniversary theme, Protecting the People, Securing the State.
Looking back, the AFP was formally organized during the American Commonwealth era through National Defense Act of 1935. During the Philippine Commonwealth period, President Manuel L. Quezon, the first president of the Commonwealth, renamed the Philippine Army to Armed Forces of the Philippines on December 21, 1935, in accordance with the National Defense Act of 1935.
As we now proceed with the program, everyone is enjoined to stand for the singing of the Philippine National Anthem.
All. Ta! Lipunan, huwag kamay. Ta!
Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisigil. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bughaw, may dilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagniningning. Ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng walhati't pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya ng pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Baba kamay.
Please remain standing.
Baba. Ta!
The invocation will be officiated by Most Reverend Bishop Oscar Jaime L. Florencio, Doctor of Divinity, the Military Bishop, Military Ordinariate of the Philippines.
Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge the Lord, and He will direct your path. Let us pray. Almighty God, source of all graces and blessings, in humility we praise and thank you as we raise the attention of our minds and the devotion of our hearts to your sacred presence, to pray for the armed forces of the Philippines on this 83rd anniversary celebration, to pray for this testimonial review, and to pray for this change of command ceremony and this tradition of succession ensures the leadership for the accomplishment of the mission. Sanctify this event, O God, with your blessing, for this is a testament of our deep faith in you as we live our oath and our mandate to protect the people and to secure our state. We beseech you, O God, to inspire us so that each one will derive from this celebration the enlightenment, the moment, and the memory that we envisioned, because persons are gifts, and every vocation and position that you bestow to every man is a fulfillment of your divine plan. For we firmly believe that everything, O God, happens for a reason, because the future is in your hands. So accept, we beseech you, O God, our sacrifices and accomplishments in the past, our plans and programs for the future. These are our humble offerings to serve the Filipino people as we faithfully abide with our core values of honor, service, and patriotism. With magnanimous hearts, we implore your distinct benedictions on our Commander-in-Chief, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Finally, may the God of life, the God of providence, the God of history and destiny, bless, protect, and prosper every Filipino and the armed forces of the Philippines. Amen.
Thank you. Please be seated.
The 83rd AFP anniversary celebration is highlighted by the conferment of awards in recognition of the meritorious achievements and exemplary performances contributing to the accomplishments of the Armed Forces mandated mission.
The Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, General Carlito Galvez Jr., is requested to present the awards, assisted by the Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel J1, Major General Erickson R. Gloria. For the first award, we'd like to request, of course, our Secretary of National Defense to assist the President, together with the Chief of Staff and the J1. For acts of conspicuous courage and gallantry in the face of armed enemy while serving as team leader of the 14th Scout Ranger Company during an encounter with undetermined number of Abu Sayyaf group at Tipo-Tipo, Basilan Province, which resulted to the neutralization of 9 ASG members and recovery of 1 caliber 50 heavy machine gun. The Distinguished Conduct Star is hereby presented to Technical Sergeant Antonio G. Basa, 828731, Philippine Army.
In grateful recognition of its effort to respond to the urgency of addressing issues and concerns in the communities of Paquibato District, Davao City, and other conflict areas in the province, this initiative significantly contributed to the AFP's Development Support and Security Plan Kapayapaan. The Kapayapaan Award is hereby presented to Peace 911 Task Force. The plaque will be received by Ms. Irene M. Santiago, Peace Advisor to Mayor Sara Duterte Carpio.
In grateful recognition of her outstanding and valuable support through various peace and development initiatives in Caraga region, her efforts and initiatives significantly contributed to the AFP's development support and security plan Kapayapaan. The Kapayapaan Award is hereby presented to Director Myla Faye Aurora B. Carino, CESO 3, Regional Director NEDA 13.
Thank you. In grateful appreciation of his eminently meritorious and invaluable achievement rendered as Commander, Citizen Armed Forces AFP-wide Technical Service Reserve component of the Armed Forces of the Philippines Reserve Force, the plaque of appreciation is hereby presented to Brigadier General Peter C. Suchanko, Officer-132484, Armed Forces of the Philippines Reserve.
In grateful appreciation of their invaluable support to the Armed Forces of the Philippines, particularly by providing financial assistance to the families of the soldiers killed in action during the Marawi crisis, their selfless acts have demonstrated their unfailing commitment to peace and genuine appreciation to the courage of the heroes of Marawi. The plaque of appreciation is presented to San Miguel Foundation Incorporated. The plaque will be received by Ms. Rona May Tanchico, the program head of San Miguel Foundation. Okay, thank you.
In profound and grateful appreciation of the unwavering support to the Armed Forces of the Philippines, by promoting the excellence of the Filipino soldiers through the Outstanding Filipinos Award for Soldiers. The plaque of appreciation is hereby presented to Metrobank Foundation Incorporated. The plaque will be received by Mr. Nicanor L. Torres Jr., Executive Director, Metrobank Foundation. Thank you. Same award is presented to Rotary Club of Makati Metro. The plaque will be received by Attorney Al Miguel T. Lugardo, the Vice President, Rotary Club of Makati Metro.
We'll proceed with the presentation of the Order of Lapu-Lapu Awards. The citation will be read by the Chief of the Presidential Protocol and Presidential Assistant on Foreign Affairs, Mr. Robert E. A. Borge.
The Order of Lapu-Lapu was established in 2017 and is conferred by the President of the Philippines in recognition of the exemplary service rendered by officials and personnel of the government, as well as private individuals, in significantly advancing a campaign or advocacy of the President, particularly acts of valor and kindness described as extraordinary acts of service and exceptional contributions to the country. The Order of Lapu-Lapu Rank of Kamagi is awarded to officials and personnel of the government and private individuals who actively participated in and contributed significantly to an activity pursuant to a campaign or advocacy of the President. The Order of Lapu-Lapu Rank of Kamagi is hereby awarded to Lieutenant Colonel Edwin M. Paredes. The Order of Lapu-Lapu Rank of Kamagi is hereby awarded to Lieutenant Colonel Ronald M. Virtudazo. The Order of Lapu-Lapu Rank of Kamagi is hereby awarded to Technical Sergeant Lester B. Oro.
Thank you to the President, to the Secretary of National Defense, to the Chief of Staff, and to J1. Ladies and gentlemen, a big hand for all the awardees.
We'll now proceed to the second part of today's program, the testimonial review in honor of the outgoing Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, General Carlito G. Galvez, Jr. Everyone is enjoined to stand for the presentation of command and honors.
Tanghal! Ta! Kalipunan, bugay kamay. Na! Baba kamay. Na!
Please be seated.
Baba! Ta!
The troop commander will present the troops for inspection.
Ginoo, handa na po ang sampanaw upang libutin
The Honorary General Carlito G. Galvez, Jr. will inspect the troops, accompanied by the Vice Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines. They will be joined by the Troop Commander, Major General Pelayo R. Valenzuela.
A true leader has the confidence to stand alone, the courage to make tough decisions, and the compassion to listen to the needs of others. He does not set out to be a leader but becomes one by equality of his actions and the integrity of his intent. These were the words of General Douglas MacArthur. This aptly describes our honoree, the leader who gave out his great share of his time, talent, expertise, and compassion for the armed forces, for each and every soldier, for the country and the Filipino people, General Carlito Galvez Jr., Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines. A well-admired officer who leads and empowers his men. He ensures that they would give their best in carrying out the duty they sworn to uphold. As a leader, he puts premium on form and substance, which earned him the respect and trust of his men. His display of competence, character, and composure inspired them to go where he leads them. The main priority thrusts of his tenure are anchored on the following objectives: decisively end the communist insurgency, put an end to violent extremism and terrorism, support law enforcement agencies in the fight against illegal drugs and criminality, and promote transparency and good governance, and continue the fight against corruption within the organization.
Calling to walk the path of peace, General Galvez reiterated full support for the peace process that will pave the way to the final peaceful and political resolution of the conflict in Mindanao. He intends to strengthen existing peace mechanisms and revitalize the peace and development offices at the unified command level to more effectively address the grievances of the people of Mindanao and create the conditions for a just and lasting peace in the South. Moreover, General Galvez is also focused on enhancing the AFP's territorial defense posture, especially in the western frontier and at the Philippine Rise, to further secure the country's strategic and maritime interests, safeguard the Philippine sovereignty, and ensure our territorial integrity. His leadership maxim that every soldier should practice always doing what is right ensure that the AFP actions are marked with honor, courage, integrity, and loyalty.
During his stint as Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, he had undertaken steps towards real transformation. He pursued a sustainment of reforms done through strengthening internal controls, checks, and balances. Through his leadership thrust, the AFP is currently implementing personal and institutional financial reform initiatives with the end in view of improving the financial stature of the Filipino soldiers and the level of effectiveness and efficiency of the financial systems of the different AFP institutions. These initiatives include conduct of integrity building and enhancement programs, strengthening of the management and financial integrity of the financial institutions to enhance their accountability, institute transparency, and further improve the delivery of services. Review of policies to ensure the protection of the AFP personal transactions with AFP-accredited financial institutions, strengthening and sustaining the AFP Provident Funds, institutionalization of financial literacy program in all AFP training institution, minimization of effective interest rate of loans, and increased life insurance premiums of AFP personnel.
Moreover, General Galvez stood tall to weed out corruption in the implementation of the modernization program, where he required all members of the DASA, TWG, BAC, and all others involved in the procurement process to take an oath during one of the flag-raising ceremonies. And in support to AFP's effort to immediately resolve cases involving corruptions, he gave guidance to strengthen and support the General Court-Martial to ensure the prompt disposition of cases. General Galvez sought to sustain the AFP transformation roadmap so as to align the Army, Navy, and Air Force towards the transformation, for his battle cry is to uphold AFP's desire to serve the Filipino people by providing the highest standard of public service as the Armed Forces of the Philippines continues its aspiration to become a beacon of good governance and a source of national pride.
All these feats, part and parcel of which he attributes to his family, with wife Mrs. Marisa Pascua Galvez and daughter Mary Frances Therese Galvez. as our honoree lives the military service and closes his colorful military career, his legacy has taken root. These will be remembered for many generations. The military organization, which he will leave behind, will forever be inspiring to remain steadfast in upholding excellence and integrity in its endeavors, all in the pursuit of becoming a world-class armed forces, a source of national pride. Ladies and gentlemen, an exemplar of a true officer and a gentleman, a steadfast leader with principles, yet with a soft heart to his men. The 50th Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, General Carlito Galvez Jr. In a short while, we'll have the presentation of award to the outgoing Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines.
Awards and decorations are major proofs of noble acts, display of skills, competence, and excellence. The presentation of award is an acknowledgement for the exceptional performance rendered especially in the military service.
The award to be presented is the Philippine Legion of Honor, degree of Chief Commander. The award is being presented to the officers of the Armed Forces of the Philippines for meritorious and exceptional service rendered to the country and the Filipino people. The honoree, General Carlito Galvez Jr., outgoing Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, is requested to stand and step forward for the presentation of award. The citation of award will be read by the Chief of the Presidential Protocol and Presidential Assistant on Foreign Affairs, Mr. Robert E.A. Borge.
The citation reads, Malacanang Palace, be it known to all men by these presents that I, Rodrigo Roa Duterte, President of the Philippines, by virtue of the powers vested in me by law, for eminently meritorious and valuable service rendered to the Republic of the Philippines and the democratic ideals for which it stands, in his capacity as the 50th Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines from 24th April to 11th December 2018, imbued with a deep sense of duty and inspired by the highest standard of idealism, General Galvez ably upgraded the Armed Forces of the Philippines' professionalism, integrity, and transparency to a level it has never been before through the institution of right policies and adoption of measures to weed out corruption. A true bridging leader, that is General Galvez, he led from the heart, ensuring that the breakthroughs of the AFP's transformation journey are genuinely felt and fully embraced by every man and woman of the Armed Forces of the Philippines as reflected in its high trust approval rating. Known for his ingenuity and resourcefulness, General Galvez ensured that the AFP's organizational strategy is tailored to the country's unique security landscape by instituting force restructuring and organizational development initiatives such as activation of joint task forces that orchestrated unified efforts in joint operations, thereby attaining operational effectiveness. Aside from this, he guaranteed that the capability upgrade and modernization in the Horizon 2 of the revised AFP modernization program is a topmost priority alongside activity of the AFP's readiness to expand the country's internal and external defense capabilities. General Galvez, in his deliberate ways, heeded the call of the Commander-in-Chief to defeat and decimate all terrorists and lawless elements through sustained conduct of intensified focused military operations against the Abu Sayyaf Group, Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters, New People's Army, and other enemies of the state. His genuine display of sincerity has persuaded the enemies of the state to return to the government's fold that led to the influx of rebel surrenderies from the different areas of the archipelago. Aside from the serious concerns of terrorism, the onslaught of Super Typhoon Ompong in northern and central Luzon greatly challenged his might and resolve, but equipped with an extraordinary management acumen, he competently ushered the AFP in planning, executing, and overseeing its search, rescue, and retrieval efforts. His exceptional leadership qualities guided the AFP in the fulfillment of its mandate of securing the sovereignty for the state and ensuring the integrity of national territory, protection of the country's vital interests, and exercise of sovereign rights from the contiguous zone up to the exclusive economic zone and continental shelf through the conduct of vigorous and vigilant sovereignty patrols and sustained maritime domain awareness operations. General Galvez has collaborated continuously with all ASEAN member states and renewed cooperation with partner nations through active and constant engagement that resulted to strengthened ties and vibrant relations. Moreover, he kept the armed forces of the Philippines apolitical and united, ensuring that the military is unperturbed by political noise and undertones that threaten the stability and order in the government during the height of various controversies. By these extraordinary achievements, General Galvez earned the respect and admiration of the Philippine government and the Filipino people. Have caused to be inscribed, therefore, in the roster of Philippine Legion of Honor with a degree of Chief Commander, the name of General Carlito G. Galvez Jr., 0-9267, Armed Forces of the Philippines, done in the city of Manila this 11th day of December in the year of our Lord 2018.
Please rise for the presentation of the award. We'd like to request Mrs. Marisa P. Galvez, ma'am, to join the Chief of Staff and assist as he receives the award. President Rodrigo Duterte is now requested to present the award, assisted by the Secretary of National Defense, Delphine and Lorenzana. Thank you to President Duterte, to the Secretary of National Defense, and Mrs. Galvez. Please be seated. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, a big hand for General Carlito Galvez Jr.
We'll now witness the change of command ceremony for the Chief of Staff Armed Forces of the Philippines. The Assistant, the Adjutant General Armed Forces of the Philippines, Colonel Ferdinand L. Torres, will read the relief and designation orders.
General Headquarters, Armed Forces of the Philippines, Camp General Emilio Aguinaldo, Quezon City. General Orders Number 1392, published on 05 December 2018. Section 1, Paragraph 1, Termination. The designation of General Carlito Galvez Jr., Officer DAS 9267, as Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines is terminated effective 11 December 2018. Section 2, Designation. Lieutenant General Benjamin Rasgo Madrigal Jr., Officer DAS 9228, is designated as Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, effective 11/2018, by command of General Galvez Jr., Official Gaudencio C. Collado Jr., Vice Admiral, Armed Forces of the Philippines, the Deputy Chief of Staff. Signed, Maxima O. Ignacio, Brigadier General, Armed Forces of the Philippines, the Adjutant General.
The outgoing Chief of Staff Armed Forces of the Philippines, General Carlito G. Galvez Jr., will read and sign the order for his relinquishment of command.
General Headquarters, Armed Forces of the Philippines, Camp General Emilio Aguinaldo, Quezon City, 11 December 2018, General Orders Number 1392. Pursuant to Paragraph 1, Section 1, dated 05 December 2018, relinquishment of orders. I hereby relinquish my duties and responsibilities as the Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, effective this date, and I sign in your presence.
The outgoing Chief of Staff will order the AFP Surgeon Major, First Chief Master Surgeon Lito A. Tompayugan to hold down his personal flag.
Sergeant Major. Lower my flag.
The change of command ceremony affords us to share with our guests and colleagues in the government service one of the armed forces of the Philippines' customs and traditions. For the outgoing Chief of Staff, as he relinquishes his duties and responsibilities to his successor, one of his last order is the lowering of his personal flag. At this moment, this also symbolizes that his more than 37 colorful years of military service has marked its closure.
The AFP Surgeon Major will present the encased personal flag of the outgoing Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines.
The incoming Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, Lieutenant General Benjamin R. Madrigal Jr., will read and sign the order for his assumption of command.
General Headquarters, Armed Forces of the Philippines, Camp General Emilio Aguinaldo, Quezon City, 11 December 2018. General Orders Number 1392. Pursuant to Section 2, dated 05 December 2018, Assumption of Orders. I hereby assume the duties and responsibilities as the Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, effective this date, and I sign in your presence.
We shall now witness the handover of the command symbol to be presided by President Rodrigo Roa Duterte.
Saber is a representation of trustworthiness and steadfastness. This represents responsibility, Saber is associated with military leadership and warfare.
The new Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, Lieutenant General Benjamin R. Madrigal Jr., will now give his first order to raise his personal flag. This will be followed by his remarks.
Sergeant Major. Raise my flag.
For the new Chief of Staff, one of his first orders is the erasing of his personal flag. This represents that he is now in command of the Armed Forces of the Philippines.
With the permission of the presiding officer, may I ask, sir, the troop commander to give the troops paraders.
Tikos! Ha! Kalipunan, tikas. Ha!
Before anything else, let me greet our presiding officer, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Mayor Rodrigo Duterte, sir. Vice President Maria Leonor Robredo, Vice President of the Republic of the Philippines. Former President Fidel Valdez Ramos, and Speaker of the House of Representatives and former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. The Secretary of National Defense, Secretary Delpin and Lorenzana, and his lovely wife, Ma'am Edith. The outgoing Chief of Staff, General Carlito G. Galvez Jr. Advance happy birthday, sir. And of course, his lovely wife, Maris, and daughter, Frances. The Military Bishop, Most Reverend Oscar Jaime Florencio. Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps, Ambassador Sung Kim of the United States, Ambassador Amanda Gorley of Australia, Ambassador Bjorn Jansen of Norway, Ambassador Tranatip Upatising of Thailand, Ambassador Kok Tan of Vietnam, Ambassador Joharia Binti Abdul Wahab of Brunei Darussalam, Ambassador Sinyo Hari Sarundahang of Indonesia, Ambassador Win Naing of Myanmar, Ambassador Jose Gaspar dos Reis, Korea, Piedade of Timor-Leste, Mr. Tan King Seng, the Charge d'Affaires Minister, Chancellor of China, Ambassador Han Dong-man of South Korea. Let me especially acknowledge the presence of Admiral Philip Davidson, the Commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, other honorable heads of national government agencies, members of the Cabinet, led by Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea, sir, NSA Secretary Hermogenes Esperon Jr., DSWD Secretary Rolando Bautista. Let me also include former Special Assistant to the President, Christopher Lawrence Bongo, sir. The distinguished members and commissioners of the Bangsamoro Transition Commission, headed by Chairman Gadzali Jaafar. Leaders and members of the MILF, headed by Alhaj Murad Ibrahim. I also wish to acknowledge Chairman Yusuf Jikiri, the Chairman of the MNLF Central Committee. Our Medal for Valor awardees present, led by Lieutenant General Arturo Ortiz, former Commanding General of the Philippine Army, former Secretary of National Defense, former Secretary Orlando Mercado, and Gilbert Teodoro, sir. The former Chiefs of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines who are here present, General Benjamin Defensor Jr., General Junicio Santiago, Ambassador Alexander Llano, General Victor Ibrado, General Gregorio Catapang Jr., General Ricardo Visaya, General Hernando Iriberi, Lieutenant General Glorioso Miranda, General Eduardo Año, and General Emmanuel Bautista. Other officials of the Department of National Defense, led by Undersecretary Cardoso Luna, representing the Chief of the Philippine National Police, Police Director General Pancratius Cascolan, and Police Deputy Director General Mendez, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, Lieutenant General Salvador Melchor Mison Jr., the Deputy Chief of Staff, Vice Admiral Gaudencio Collado Jr., our major service commanders, the Commanding General of the Philippine Army, Lieutenant General Macairog Alberto, the Flag Officer in Command, Vice Admiral Robert Empedrad, the Commanding General of the Philippine Air Force, Lieutenant General Galileo Gerard Quintanar Jr., the commanders of the Unified Commands, Lieutenant General Emmanuel Salamat of NOLCOM, Lieutenant General Danilo Pamonag of SOLCOM, Lieutenant General Rosano Brigues of WESCOM, Lieutenant General Arnel de la Vega of Western Mindanao Command, and Major General Noel Clement of Central Command. Members of the Joint Personnel Special Staff, other general and flag officers present, the members of PMA Sandiwa Class of 1985, and our lovely ladies, the Sandiwatas, please rise to be recognized. Thank you. The commanders of AFP-wide support units and other major units of the Philippine Army, the Philippine Air Force, and the Philippine Navy. The Army Sergeant Major, First Chief Master Sergeant Lito Tumpayogan. The members of the Foreign Armed Forces Attaché Corps. And with your indulgence, sir, allow me to recognize my personal guests. Of course, first on the list, my ever-supportive, ever-loving, and ever-beautiful wife, Gemma. And our children, Jed, Monica, Nikki, and Daryl. My mother, Mrs. Luz Rasgo Madrigal, to whom I owe my life. Kung wala po siya, wala po ako dito ngayon. Dahil nga lamang po at namayapa na ang aking ama, si Master Sergeant Benjamin Madrigal Sr. Dahil ito po ang katuparan ng kanyang pangarap. Siya po talaga ang nagtulak sa akin para maging sundalo. Narito rin po ang aking mga kapatid, Dr. Alexander Madrigal, the Regional Director of the OST Region 4A. My other siblings, Joselito, Luz Biminda, my relatives and in-laws, please rise to be recognized. Hindi ko na po isa-isahin. My foster parents, when I was a cadet in Baguio City, Mr. Tony and Ms. Emma Alvarez and their children. government officials and local chief executives whom I have worked with in my previous assignments, former Governor and now Congresswoman Corazon Nunez Malanyaon of Davao Oriental, Governor Vicente Pimentel Jr. of Surigao del Sur, represented by Mayor Ayek, Governor Maria Angelica Rosdale Amante Matba of Agusan del Norte, Governor Tyrone Uy of Compostela Valley, of course, Governor Matba of Tawi-Tawi, former ARMM Assemblyman Sarangani, my mentors, the officers who have molded me to what I am today. Sila po ang tumulong, gumabay sa akin kung kaya po narito ako ngayon. Some of them I have already mentioned earlier. Of course, Secretary Ed Año and his wife, Ma'am Jean, General Victor Ibrado, General Bagasin, General Mapagu, General Tabaquero, General Art Ortiz, General Rainier Cruz, General Boac, General Narcisse, Major General Gunn, and of course our legendary tactical officer, General Yapching. Classmates from the University of the Philippines Rural High School class of 1980, please rise. Friends from Davao, Cagayan de Oro, Quezon, Laguna, and Batangas, Mr. Henry Chu, Mr. Bencia, Mr. Ray Chang, Ayi Hernandez, Bing and Boy de los Reyes, Francis D., best friends from San Pablo, Los Baños, and Manila, the Manangs and the Inangs of Class 81, my fraternal brothers from the free and accepted Masons of the Philippines, led by no less than the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of the Philippines, Most Worshipful Romeo Momo, our partners from the media, other guests, officers, enlisted personnel, and civilian employees of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I stand before you today, honored yet humbled as I assume my post as the 51st Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. This ceremony is even made more meaningful as we jointly celebrate the 83rd anniversary of our armed forces, and hence in time for the opening of a new chapter in our glorious history. I am profoundly grateful, foremost, to the great architect of the universe, the Lord Almighty, for the many blessings that He continues to bestow upon me and my family. To the Commander-in-Chief, President Rodrigo Duterte, thank you, sir, for giving me this great privilege and honor to be your Armed Forces Chief of Staff. To the Secretary of National Defense, Secretary Delpin Lorenzana, for the inspiring guidance he has provided to the defense and military institutions. To my esteemed predecessor, the outgoing Chief of Staff, General Galvez, one of the finest and well-respected officers of our generation. My deepest admiration, Mr. The same goes to all our predecessors, the former Chiefs of Staff, many of whom are here present. I would like to specially mention Secretary Eduardo Año for his mentorship and fine example of leadership. And to the many people who have helped shape my career and played important roles in my military and personal life. My superiors, peers, subordinates, family, and friends who have all contributed and brought me to this position. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank the officers and men and women of the armed forces whom I have worked with, for you are all part of what I am today. This includes, of course, the members of the Philippine Military Academies and DIWA class of 1985. and their ladies. Finally, I pay special tribute to my family, who has always been my source of inspiration. You have always supported me and willingly accepted the demands of my military profession. To my parents, to whom I owe my life and what I am today, my siblings, and to my beautiful wife, Gemma, my #1 supporter, and honest-to-goodness critic. Let me also acknowledge our children, Jed, Monica, Nikki, and Daryl, who have come to understand the responsibilities of the military uniform I wear. Sa inyo pong lahat, maraming salamat. At ipinangangako ko po ang lahat ng aking makakaya sa tungkuling ito. Considering the AFP's vision to be a world-class armed forces that is a source of national pride, and the mission to protect the people and secure the sovereignty of the state and the integrity of the national territory, the task of leading the armed forces is simply overwhelming. However, I am confident that we can do all this, knowing that we have a very capable, better equipped, professional, and solid Team AFP that is able to take on the multifarious roles of civil-military cooperation, support to law enforcement authorities in the fight against criminality and illegal drugs, defense of our sovereign territory, and the application of military force against terrorists and other armed groups, all at the same time. We have already achieved significant developments in our peace and security agenda, especially ushered in by the strategic moves initiated no less than by our President to personally dialogue with the MNLF and MILF leaders, the different tribal leaders, local chief executives, and even former rebels. Today, peace-inclined armed groups are now working in tandem with government. Our relentless pursuit in terror cells, identified with Dawla Islamiyah, Abu Sayyaf, and remnants of the Mauti group, have greatly reduced their terror threat, constricted their movements, and disrupted their terroristic plans. Likewise, the active participation of our local executives and stakeholders have resulted in the windfall of surrendered personalities from the communist terrorist group. These clearly show that we are in the right path to achieving lasting peace and sustainable development for our people. But to really put an end to insurgency and achieve conflict-resilient communities, we still need a lot more sustained, united, and determined effort. Incidentally, my tour of duty also comes at this opportune time that the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict has been officially created, with no less than our Commander-in-Chief leading it. This, I believe, would give flesh to what we call the whole-of-nation approach to end this 50-year-old multi-dimensional peace problem. We are at this stage in our peace campaign, which counterinsurgency expert Gordon McCormick describes as a strong win, where we are able to break the rebels' organized resistance and determination to resist. However, to reach complete victory and win the elusive peace, apart from our traditional combat competencies, our campaign needs a unified effort at various levels of government to attain strategic stakeholder convergence, to address the mass-based united front, army, and party building of the insurgents. We need to bring our peace and development programs closer together and direct them towards addressing the concerns of conflict-affected areas and transforming them into conflict-resilient and progress-oriented communities. We must enhance the capability of government in laying the groundwork for post-conflict scenarios, where peace becomes the norm and development efforts take center stage. To do all this, we need to set our goal not only on defeating the enemy and attaining operational victories. We have already proven that. What we need is to focus on capacitating ourselves in the matters of peace constituency building, stakeholder leadership, community dialogue, and nation building. This will give the government and the state forces legitimacy and full credibility to bring about sustainable peace inclusive development, and good governance. More importantly, we need to closely work together with our partners in the local government, the national government agencies, and other stakeholders, and endeavor to establish the basic foundations for peace mechanisms, propagating the culture of unity and peace among our people, and the speedy reintegration of former rebels to the mainstream society. If we are able to do this, then I believe this would eventually lead to the end of insurgency. And with the strong resolve of our current national leadership, the active support of our stakeholders, it can be done. Meanwhile, we will continue to sustain our gains in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao by ensuring the successful implementation of the Bangsamoro Organic Law to usher in a new era of stability and progress in the area. We'll also keep up the pace of diminishing the existence of terrorist cells and other armed peace spoilers so we can protect our people and insulate our communities from their cloud of fear through our preventing and countering violent extremism initiatives with the support of our concerned agencies and the Muslim community. We cannot let another Marawi-like threat to happen again. While we pursue our operational and organizational objectives, we will also optimize the success of our AFP transformation roadmap, and the many significant innovations have brought not only the desired reforms, but also resulted to enhanced credibility and recognition for our continuing journey towards becoming an armed forces that our people can rely on and be proud of. I also believe that one single misdemeanor or breach of discipline by our troops will discredit our credibility or even erase all our operational accomplishments. As such, as we pursue a culture of excellence, we will also endeavor to achieve good governance and professionalism among our ranks. And as we look forward to another year of service, I call on the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines of Team AFP for your selfless dedication to our sworn duty. We have targets and deadlines to meet. Let us all march in cadence towards the same direction, the same sense of urgency, and in the same determined pace. To all our fellow Filipinos, your support and encouragement have inspired us every step of the way. We will count on you once again as we unite to achieve our common aspirations for our nation. For too long, our prospects as a country have been sidetracked by the challenges of rebellion and divisiveness. Only our solid public leadership in a venue of stakeholder convergence can finally bring about the end result that we all desire. We are ready to win the peace for a more hopeful, secure, and abundant future for every Filipino. And with God's grace, we shall prevail. Sa atin pong pagkakaisa, lahat ating makakaya. Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay ang sandatahang lakas ng Pilipinas. Mabuhay po tayong lahat.
Kalipunan.
Thank you to the new Chief of Staff Armed Forces of the Philippines.
Sampanaw! Ta!
We shall move on to the retirement ceremony of General Carlito G. Galvez, Jr. We'd like to request General Galvez, sir, to please stand and step forward as the Assistant, the Adjutant General Armed Forces of the Philippines, reads the retirement order.
Republic of the Philippines, Department of National Defense, the Headquarters, Armed Forces of the Philippines, Camp General Emilio Aguinaldo, Quezon City. General Orders Number 1023, published on 03 September 2018. Compulsory retirement. Pursuant to Sections 5A and 17 of Presidential Decree Number 1638, as amended and in consonance with Presidential Administrative Order Number 150, dated 04 January 1990. General Carlito Galvez Jr., Officer Dash 9267, Armed Forces of the Philippines, having completed 37 years, 9 months, and 5 days of active military service in the Armed Forces of the Philippines. From 16 March 1980, third-class training. From 01 April 1980, 4 years Philippine Military Academy Cadetship. And from 22 March 1985 to 11 December 2018, is compulsorily retired in the rank of General, with retirement pay based on the salary grade of General with fifth longevity pay effective 12 December 2018 by order of the Secretary of National Defense, Official Salvador Melchor B. Mison Jr., Lieutenant General, Armed Forces of the Philippines, Acting Chief of Staff, signed Maximo Ignacio, Colonel, Philippine Air Force, General Staff Corps, the Adjutant General.
We'd like to request General Galvez, sir, to remain in front to be joined by Mrs. Marisa P. Galvez, ma'am, for the presentation of the plaques and mementos. The new Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, Lieutenant General Benjamin R. Madrigal Jr. is requested to present the plaques and the mementos to be assisted by the Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel J1.
Command plaque is here represented to General Carlito G. Galvez Jr., Officer Dash 9267, Armed Forces of the Philippines. In grateful acknowledgement of his eminently meritorious and valuable service rendered as Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines from 18 April 2018 to 12 December 2018.
Plaque of Honorable Service is presented to General Carlito G. Galvez Jr., O-9267 Armed Forces of the Philippines, in recognition of his 37 years, 9 months, and 5 days of faithful and honorable service to the Armed Forces of the Philippines. From 16 March 1980, third-class training. From 01 April 1980, 4 years Philippine Military Academy Cadetship, and from 22 March 1985 to 11 December 2018.
Framed medals is presented, which contains all the awards and decorations the honoree was conferred with during his tour of duty.
This time, the spouse, Mrs. Marisa P. Galvez, will be presented with a plaque of appreciation.
Plaque of appreciation is presented to Ms. Marisa P. Galvez in grateful appreciation of her unselfish, faithful, and devoted support to her husband's lasting contribution and dedicated service to the AFP and to our nation. Given this 12th day of December in the year of our Lord 2018, on the occasion of the retirement of her husband, General Carlito G. Galvez Jr., Armed Forces of the Philippines.
Well, thank you to the new Chief of Staff and to J1. This time, the Philippine flag will be presented to the honoree. We'd like to request President Rodrigo Duterte for the presentation of the encased Philippine flag to the honoree, assisted by the Secretary of National Defense.
The symbol of aspiration and existence of men and women in the noble profession of arms, the Philippine flag. This will be presented to General Galvez Jr. The flag is an embodiment of a great nation. This carries several symbols, of which would remind General Galvez of his fruitful years of military career.
Thank you very much to President Duterte and to the Secretary of National Defense. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, a big hand for General and Mrs. Galvez.
Let us hear the valedictory address of General Carlito Galvez Jr.
With the permission of our Commander-in-Chief, may I let the troops with Tikas Penga.
Tikas! Ha! Kalipunan, tikas. Ha!
The valedictory address that I have prepared today is full of thanksgiving and appreciation to all the people who helped shape and make me what I am today. With the permission of the President, I would like to convey all my deepest gratitude to the long list of individuals who are very dear to me and who made my life fulfilled with full of memories. For the blessing of a life in service and in leadership, I raise my hands in praise to the Lord Almighty for protecting and guiding me in winning countless battles and braving risk in the front lines. To God be the glory. For trusting that I could lead in the manner most fitting, I thank President Rodrigo Duterte, our Commander-in-Chief and President, for giving me the opportunity to lead the 145,000 strong and able armed forces of the Philippines. I am thankful to have served with a president and a leader who keeps an open mind and trust on our recommendations, such as in finally activating the 11th Infantry Division in Sulu and the National Task Force to end the communist armed conflict. The love and the care that you have given to our soldiers is incomparable. Finding time to attend the wake of our fallen heroes and to visit recuperating wounded soldiers was truly inspiring. You have traveled even how far and even during the night and stayed long enough and making our affected soldiers and their family feel that they are not statistics but human beings who are valued, cared, and loved by their President. Mr. President, thank you very much for all your care and love for us. May I also recognize the presence of our Vice President, Maria Leonor G. Robredo, and her continued support to the Armed Forces of the Philippines. I am also grateful to the presence of former Presidents, President Fidel Valdez Ramos, and Congresswoman and Speaker of the House, Madam Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, and their valuable contributions to the transformation and modernization of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Thank you, sir and madam. For the continuous mentoring and guidance, I thank the Secretary of National Defense, Delphin Lorenzana, and his wife, Ma'am Edith Lorenzana. Thank you for believing in my capacity and for your recommendation to be the commander of the 6th Infantry Division, which became the turning point of my military service and eventually led me to the post of the Western Mindanao Command and the Armed Forces. The presence of the Cabinet Secretaries in this memorable moment of my life is very much appreciated with our Executive Secretary, Amadea, Secretary Rolando Joselito Bautista of the SWD, and Secretary Eduardo Año. Thank you for your staunch support during my term as the Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines. Same acknowledgement goes to Malacanang officials who came here today, Secretary Salvador C. Almidea, our Executive Secretary, Secretary Jesus G. Dureza, Secretary Arturo Tabaquero, the Presidential Advisor on Military Affairs, Secretary Hermogenes C. Esperon, the National Security Advisor, Chairman Jose Arturo S. Garcia Jr., the Chairman of MNDA, Yusek Emmanuel Bautista. I also acknowledge and congratulate my successor, Lieutenant General Benjamin R. Madrigal Jr. and his wife, Maria Gemma, their children, Jed Matthew, Monica Isabel, Sofia Dominic, Daniel Cobangay, and his mother, Mrs. Luz Madrigal. General Madrigal, your solid record and accomplishments led you to this post, and I wish you all the best. Thank you also to Most Reverend Bishop Oscar Jaime L. Florencio, the Military Bishop, Military Order of the Philippines, for all the prayers and divine guidance, for the unselfish devotion and bottomless love. I thank my wife Marisa and my daughter Mary Frances Therese. Please rise. They are the wellspring of my inspiration and motivation, and they also suffered the burden that I had during my trying times. To my parents, Mr. Carlito Galvez Sr. and Mrs. Lourdes Galvez, my brothers and sisters and relatives from Barangay Timbagan, please rise. Thank you. Special acknowledgement to His and Her Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps present today. Thank you for your country's continued support to the Armed Forces of the Philippines and to our nation. May I also especially thank Japan for billion worth of projects in completed areas in Mindanao, and also their support to the peace process, and also to our Philippine Air Force. The United States for the continued support and strong alliance, and Australia for a series of various training activities in urban operations and counterterrorism, and also China for the opportunity for me to become the military host of the Chinese President during his recent visit here. Let me also acknowledge Admiral Philip Davidson, the commander of U.S. Indo-Pacom Pacific, who came all the way from Hawaii just to witness the AP change of command ceremony and affirm our strong alliance. And also our friend, John Felter, who founded the Light Reaction Company. Also, my special thanks to Colonel Ernest Lee, Chief of USMAG Philippines, and his wife, Emmanuel, for all the support and friendship. I am also honored by the presence of our Medal of Valor awardees, led by Lieutenant General Arturo Ortiz, who define and exemplify the best of Filipino soldiery. Please rise. These are our living heroes. Let me also greet the former Secretaries of National Defense who are here today, Secretary Orly Mercado, and also former Secretary Gilberto C. Teodoro Jr. For the guidance and inspiration, I acknowledge the gratitude of my predecessors and former AP Chief of Staff who came today, General Arnulfo Acedera, General Benjamin Defensor, General Dionisio Santiago, Secretary Hermogenes Esperon, Ambassador Alexander Villano, General Victor S. Esbrado, Yusek Ricardo David, Yusek Emmanuel Bautista, General Gregorio Pio Catapang, General Hernando DCA Ereberi, General Ricardo Bisaya, Lieutenant General Glorioso Miranda, and Secretary Eduardo Año. I believe this is one of the records that we have a lot of former Chief of Staff present. Maraming salamat po. I especially thank General Brado and General Año for always giving me the guidance and mentorship, particularly all throughout the Marawi siege. The daily advice of General Año, daily text messages gave me strength to move on. I would like also to especially mention the representatives, governors, and mayors of my major assignments in Mindanao. Please rise. May I also greet the governors under autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao. I also would like to especially mention the local chief executives of the municipalities under Western Mindanao Command, our partners in our quest for peace. Thank you for the friendship and protecting me from harm. I would also like to thank the following local chief executives from the Central Mindanao: may I also acknowledge the local government officials from my birthplace, Bustos, Bulacan, headed by Mayor Arnel Mendoza. May I also greet other officials from the Department of National Defense, led by Yusek Cardoso M. Luna. Thank you for your support. I would like also to greet other officials from the Office of the Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process, headed by Yusek Nabil Tan. Sir. We have also Al-Haj Ibrahim Murad present of the MILF, and also Chairman Yusuf Jikiri of the MNLF. We have also Sami Gambar, Chief of Staff of the MILF, and other friends from the MNLF and the MILF. This is an affirmation that really peace is at hand. My sincerest gratitude to the members of AFP leadership for making my job easier because of their dedication, professionalism, diligence, and cooperation. The AFP Command Group, the Vice Chief of Staff, and our Chief Fiscalizer, Lieutenant General Salvador Mison Jr. Sir, pwede na kitang tawagin ngayon na Badong. And the Deputy Chief of Staff, Badam Gaudencio C. Collado Jr. Kasi tinawag siya ng aking anak na hindi niya alam ng anak ko na yung Vice Admiral, ang tinawag niya ngayon, Badam. Kaya ang tawag ko ngayon sa kanya is Badam Gaudencio Collado. Our Major Service Commanders, Lieutenant General Gerard Quintanar Jr., Vice Admiral Robert Empedrad, and Lieutenant General Macairog Alberto. Please rise. Thank you also for your service as members of the Board of Generals, especially in selecting the best senior officers for the key positions of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. The members of the Joint Personnel and Special Staff, and the commanders and chiefs of the AP-wide support and separate units, the dedication, competence, efficiency, and cooperation you displayed inspired me to work with solid rock determination. For all our unified commanders, maraming salamat, daghang salamat sa inyo lahat. Lieutenant General Benjamin Madrigal, our new Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Emmanuel Salamat, Lieutenant General Danilo Pamonag, Lieutenant General Rosano Brigues, Lieutenant General Alner de la Vega, Major General Noel Clement, and Brigadier General Abraham Claro Crisis for leading your command towards our common goal in achieving our task. To our counterparts and partners in the defense and security, the Philippine National Police, represented by Deputy Director General Pancrasius Cascolan, and also my classmate from Philippine Coast Guard, the Commandant, General Elson Hermuino. Distinguished members of and commissioners of the Bangsamoro Transition Commissions, please rise. Thank you. For the kinship that has made peace a reality in Mindanao, I thank the leaders and members of the MILF and MNLF, headed by Al-Haj Murad Ibrahim and Yusuf Jikiri. We have also my friend Mohakar Iqbal, Sami Al-Mansur Gambar, and Boots Malang and Sergoria. I also especially acknowledge Chairman Yusuf Jikiri, the Chairman of the MNLF, and also Haji Randy Caron. To my mistas and their lovely spouses here present, the members of Sandiwa class of 1985, for the friendship and camaraderie throughout the years. Maraming salamat po, and please rise. Please rise. Thank you. As today is also the celebration of 83rd AP anniversary, I greet and congratulate all the honorees who were conferred with various medals earlier. Thank you also for the AP Multi-Stakeholder Governance Council for your unwavering support in transformation journey of the AP, especially the San Miguel Corporation and Metrobank Foundation. For their continued support, I acknowledge all the generals and the flag officers and the key officers of the Headquarters Philippine Army, Headquarters Philippine Navy, and Headquarters Philippine Air Force. For the hardness of spirit and the keenness of ability, I thank the Scout Ranger and SOCOM family for teaching me the warrior spirit and the credo of not leaving anyone behind in the battlefield. For their continuous concern in the AP matters, I would like to acknowledge all the members of the Association of Generals and Flag Officers and our veterans who are here today. Please rise. Sir, thank you for your mentoring and guidance. Special greetings to the President and different AP financial institutions for cooperating with our reforms and measures to improve the services for our servicemen. Thank you to all our good friends from the Foreign and Armed Forces Attaches for all out support and sterling output. I thank my staff that many years in the various command and assignments. Thank you for the Office of the Chief of Staff, the Office of the Joint Secretary in GHQ, the Western Mindanao, and the 6th Infantry Division. I also acknowledge the presence of the AP leaders, AP Officers Ladies Club, Incorporated, headed by Madam Maris. And also thank you to my classmates from the Holy Child Academy in Bustad, Bulacan, my kababayans, my classmates from AP CGSC class of Luna 47. I would also like to thank AP Sergeant Major Lito Tampayugan, and also our beloved Civilian Human Resource led by Ms. Nida Akleta. Friends from media, sa lahat ng mga sundalo at kawani na sandatahang lakas ng Pilipinas, tanggapin po ninyo ang taos-puso kong pasalamat sa giting at galing ng inyong inialay sa bawat araw ng ating paglilingkod. You have fought to the finish, and you have put life and limb on the line. You have shown the world the courage and the skill of the Filipino soldier. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Following the marching order given by the President and the Commander-in-Chief, we focus on these key targets: eradicating corruption and implementing reforms, accelerating the modernization program, finishing the campaign against the communist terrorist group, advancing the morale and welfare of our personnel, and supporting law enforcement agencies in the campaign against illegal drugs and crimes. At this point, and with the indulgence of the presiding officer, may I respectfully submit a book entitled Walking on the Path of Peace, which chronicles the accomplishment of the Armed Forces of the Philippines during my tenure as the 50th Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. In weeding out corruption, we addressed the root causes and implemented programs on various levels. A no tolerance for corruption mindset was the base for the key reforms, and financial wellness for the soldier and his family was the desired result. The changed minds and attitudes, a series of character enhancement and building integrity, transparency, and accountability in public service seminars were held. To make the AP's financial institutions soldier-centered, these were repurposed with emphasis on changing weak policies, cleansing membership, and strengthening management. To enable decent living for our soldiers and their families, personal financial reforms are being put in place. Most important, which is the proposed increase in monthly net take-home pay from 5,000 pesos to 15,000 pesos. Decisive actions has been taken on the cases of corruption and other financial issues that were uncovered, including court-martial proceedings against erring military personnel. The modernization program is on track with the President Duterte's approval of the Second Horizon revised AP modernization project list. This will mean more mobility assets, additional facility upgrades, and added firepower for the various service and units. We instituted means to preserve the integrity of all personnel involved in the execution of modernization projects by administering an oath of undertaking to serve as a reminder for them. I personally refrain from accepting any form of arrangement with interested proponents and dealers to avoid possibility of bias and preferences. Sir, when I assume command, sir, I did not allow any proponents to enter my office, sir. The campaign for peace has been gaining much ground as the whole-of-nation approach puts to rest the issues and concerns that the enemy had used to recruit and sow terror. Rebel returnees disenchanted with the red agenda continue to rejoin the mainstream in the thousands. The intensified operation significantly downgraded the capabilities of the local communist group and resulted in dismantling of 8 guerrilla fronts. Along with the proper implementation of martial law, index crime rates decreased in various areas such as Region 9, Cotabato City, and Maguindanao. Kidnapping incidents were also reduced by 79%, particularly in the ARMM areas, and more than 8,000 loose firearms were surrendered. On the economic impact, recorded investment increased by 903%, palay production increased by 19.6%, and coconut production by 16.8%. Increases in growth and gross domestic product were also recorded, particularly in ARMM, Davao Region, Sorsogon, and Zamboanga City. On tourism, air connectivity has increased, resulting in increased tourism revenues in Caraga, Surigao del Norte, and Tawi-Tawi. On the matters of forging peace in Mindanao, the MILF leadership historic visit at the General Headquarters of the AFP is an affirmation of a strong partnership with the MILF and the end of conflict in Mindanao. We are here with Haji Murad. Please rise, sir. He visited our camp, sir. The AFP continues to work closely with the Philippine National Police and other law enforcement agencies in the fight against illegal drugs and criminality. The close working relationship with the PNP is evident in the creation of the Joint Coordinating Center. In more recent developments, the AP has partnered with the Bureau of Customs to provide the necessary support to reform the airport with more intelligence units and other specialized technical assistance. With the ambit of the AP Transformation Roadmap, an initiative for a long term has been started. The AP Leadership Development Center has been activated. The intent is to build the AP's capability by building up leadership skills with moral leaders of its officers and personnel and developing the capacity and honesty to lead in joint operations. While our many lessons that we have learned through the years, those have led to our victories for peace and are most precious and most important. First, putting morale and welfare first leads to mission accomplishment. Taking care of our troops and their most basic concern frees them of the anxiety and worry that distract them from the mission. Putting their needs on the priority list is a surefire to secure victory. Second, sincerity builds and bridges and open doors for peace, for progress. When talking peace with different parties involved, the element of sincerity and the factor of trustworthiness come into play. Malasakit, pakikipagkapwa, pakikipag-usap, malilit na bagay, ngunit nagbubunga ng pagtitiwala, pagkakaibigan at pagkakaunawaan. Third, do your homework at all times. Know the enemy, know the dynamics of conflict, know the people what you really want, understand the conditions. Many of a fatal encounter or senseless battle could have been avoided if the facts were ferreted out and bigger picture was available for better decisions to be made. Simple as these lessons are, they are not applied enough. They are not default actions. In this age of instant messaging and global connectivity, let these old school tips be part of the new normal in decision-making in developing leaders. As we learn, so we dream. All that we have been able to get done points the way forward and lead us to set our sight farther higher. This then is the to-do list for all those who will take on mantle of leadership. 1, push what has been started. The momentum for transformation is good. Make it work for the AFP and for all personnel. Always do what is best and what is right. Do not allow personal motives and gains squander the trust and confidence of the President and the Filipino people for their armed forces. 2, concentrate on essentials and not on peripherals. Action should always be alighted with the goals that have been set. Stay on strategy. Third, think long-term. Visualize the possibilities and the appropriate strategies. Think beyond generation. Determine the future landscape. Anticipate and act accordingly. Your predecessors have put in place a steady foundation on how things should be done. Take on from these milestones. We have a system in place and a transformation roadmap that guides the AFP in its journey. And then last and foremost, embrace peace. Build capacity to be warriors and peacemakers. As I bid you farewell, I render one final salute to the gallant and the brave, to all those who made the ultimate sacrifice in every battle and encounter that has marked the long and storied history of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Ang inyong kadakilaan ay hindi malilimutan ng sambayanan. Ang pag-alalay ng buhay, ang isang nagbibigay na pag-asa para sa kapayapaan at kaunlaran ng ating bayan. I will happily leave the service with a grateful heart, a lifetime of memories and a promise to work for peace across our beloved land. For this soldier, public servant, and peace advocate knows that he has given his all and that he has done his very best. Ako po si General Galvez, sundalong Pilipino, taos-pusong nagpapasalamat sa sambayan ng Pilipino. Eagle 6, Mad Max is now signing off. Thank you.
Thank you, General Carlito
Kalipunan,
Galvez.
man. Sampanaw.
The guest of honor will be introduced by Secretary Delphine N. Lorenzana, Department of National Defense.
Mga kasama at mga kaibigan, ang Pangulo ng Republika ng Pilipinas, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte.
Salamat po. Kindly have your seats. Commander, can you give the tikas pahinga? Thank you.
Tikas! Ha! Tikas. Ha!
By the way, before I forget, si General Galvez will join the cabinet next week as the Secretary of the Peace Process Office. I think he is the 9th military man to join my government. Vice President Maria Leonor Robredo, former President and now Speaker Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, former President Fidel Ramos, Sir, Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps, Executive Secretary Salvador Medaldia, National Defense Secretary Delphine Lorenzana, and other members of the Cabinet, outgoing Chief of Staff Carlito Galvez, the new Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Lieutenant General Benjamin Madrigal, Major Service Commanders, officers, enlisted men, personnel, and civilian employees of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Other distinguished guests, mga kababayan, it is my pleasure to stand before the courageous men and women of the Armed Forces of the Philippines who have tirelessly worked to secure the freedom we enjoy today. As you celebrate more than 8 meaningful decades of selfless service and sacrifice for the Filipino people, we also congratulate Carlito Galvez for his successful tour of duty as Chief of Staff of the AFP. We recognize his significant contributions in strengthening our armed forces, especially in his efforts to eradicate the ills that plague our society. He fought corruption within the organization by initiating reforms that improve the financial state of our soldiers and the efficiency of the financial system of the AFP. During his stint, General Galvez also created AFP Development Center to address gaps in the existing AFP leadership program and to further develop the character, competence, and capacity of our military. Upon assuming command, he supervised our internal security operations in the implementation of martial law in Mindanao. This led to the neutralization of more than 2,000 terrorists, the recovery of thousands of firearms, and the clearing of 7 guerrilla fronts. As he retires from his valiant service to our nation, his accomplishments speak well of how he fulfilled his mission to foster a stronger and more dependable armed forces, as well as safer and more secure Philippines. General Galvez, as you hang up your uniform, you can stand proud knowing that the armed forces that you pass on is one that is formidable and empowered. Be assured that as you leave military service, you have inspired others with work and have set an edifying example for the entire institution. Last week, I signed Executive Order Number 70, creating the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict. from the military-centric approach that gave us our recent successes against the communist movement, we now shift to a new civilian-led approach that will tap other government agencies and other private sector in bringing basic services and other development interventions that will address the root cause of the communist movement. General Madrigal, you are now tasked with the responsibility of preserving peace and ensuring order as we shift to this new approach. Sustain the progress of those who came before you and create a legacy that will cause ripples for positive change in the years to come. As we trudge the noble path of realizing lasting peace and sustainable development in our country, I trust that under General Benjamin Madrigal's leadership, the AFP will achieve more milestones in the campaign to combat terrorism, to end insurgency, and address lingering and emerging threats to national security. The Filipino people count on the AFP to remain steadfast in its mission to defend our land and preserve the peace in our communities. Let us not fail them. As I have done in my part to ensure the welfare and well-being of our troops, including their immediate families, I now ask our men and women in uniform to support the leadership of General Madrigal so that we soon realize our aspiration for a stronger armed forces and a safer and more secure nation. Congratulations to General Galvez, General Madrigal, at mabuhay ang sandatang lakas ng Pilipinas.
Thank you very much to President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. A memento will be presented to President Rodrigo Roa Duterte by the new Chief of Staff Armed Forces of the Philippines, Lieutenant General Benjamin R. Madrigal Jr.
The guests may be seated. Once again, the guests may be seated. The memento, the micro-etched Aguinaldo framed glass, hereby presented to President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, President of the Republic of the Philippines and Commander-in-Chief Armed Forces of the Philippines, in grateful appreciation of the President and Commander-in-Chief's untiring and relentless effort in pursuing the modernization of the Armed Forces of the Philippines and unflinching commitment in constantly uplifting the morale of the soldiers, airmen, sailors, Marines, civilian human resource, and reservists. It depicts the Camp General Emilio Aguinaldo, which houses the General Headquarters of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, named after a Filipino hero and revolutionary leader. Thank you very much. We shall now proceed with a pass-in review.
Kalipunan, sa malikod ko. Kan! Pasa! Proceed! Sa kanang balikat! Ha! Talupad! Unang talupad! Pasulong! Kad!
Hit sa kaliwa. Cut.
We'd like to request General Galvez, sir, to proceed down the grandstand for the final review.
Today, this cliche, as they call it, is what everybody feels as we bid farewell to yet another military leader whose contribution and role in the armed forces have been a vital one, General Carlito Galvez Jr.
As General Galvez relinquished his post, he is assured that his successor, Lieutenant General Benjamin R. Madrigal Jr., will continue what he had worked on and even make the armed forces of the Philippines soar towards greater achievements.
To our honoree, General Galvez, sir, the officers, men and women, and civilian personnel of the Armed Forces of the Philippines proudly wish you all the best. Congratulations, more power, and Godspeed.
Ladies and gentlemen, the various contingents of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, ang mga makabagong katipunero, makadiyos, makakalikasan, makatao at makabansa.
Leading the parading contingent is Major General Pelayo R. Valenzuela, his staff, Colonels Vicente Naldoza, Jose Richie Pabilonia, Dennis Perez, and Lawrence Carrion, Captain Richard David, and Colonel Simplicius Alice.
Following is the AFP Composite Band under the baton of Sergeant Emmanuel de Taza.
The 1st Brigade is headed by Commodore Ray de la Cruz, his staff, Commanders Victor Ramos and Teodoro Bolanio, Lieutenant Colonels Fernando Zaragoza, Ferdinand Encomienda, Lebrito Olmoguez, and Cyril Dawatin.
Approaching is the 1st Battalion from the Philippine Military Academy and is being led by Cadet 1st Class Vincent Sestoso, his staff Cadet 1st Class Clark Jefferson Madarang, Kenneth Castillo, Carl Brian Maro, and J.B. Lagasca. For the year 2018, the Philippine Military Academy had recognized the need to conduct a strategy refresh, which produced the PMA Transformation Roadmap 2028.
Following is the Army contingent under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Jamal Bonza. His staff, Captain Edward Ian Licablanca, First Lieutenant Jaime Serna III Jose Martin Nuas, and Arturo Medina Jr. The Philippine Army has embarked on a transformation program that placed emphasis in a change in paradigm, the Army Transformation Roadmap 2028, which received various recognition. The Gold Trailblazer Award in 2014, Island of Good Governance in 2015, and the Palladium Balance Scorecard Hall of Fame 2018.
The protectors of the Philippine seas and the first line of defense to uphold our territorial integrity, the Philippine Navy. The battalion is under Commander Gabriel Ataiza. His staff, Lieutenant Commanders Johans Cruzada, Jaire Castillo, Juan Carrion, and Joseph Lauron. In 2006, the Philippine Navy embraced good governance when it adopted the performance governance system in crafting its Sail Plan 2020. The Navy had come a long way since it began its transformation. After 11 years of working towards its goal, they have reaped what they have sown.
Now we have the Angels of Mercy and the Guardians of the Philippine Skies, the Air Force Battalion led by Lieutenant Colonel Rene Sevilla. His staff, Majors Neil de la Cruz, Albert Estidelia, Virgo Figueroa, and Adrian Ferrer. Time and again, the Philippine Air Force has proven to be a potent military force, primarily for the protection of the Filipino people and country's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The audience is requested to stand for the passing of the colors. You may be seated as soon as the colors have passed. Thank you.
National colors are carried by the cadets from the Philippine Military Academy with the major service colors and general headquarters.
The 2nd Brigade is commanded by Brigadier General Leonard Agustin. His staff, Lieutenant Colonels Marcelo Alday, Darwin Katibog, Henry Makatangay, Dino Hudson Aznar, and Danilo Facundo.
Following is the Philippine Army Special Operations Forces under Lieutenant Colonel Versicio San Jose Jr., his staff, Majors Francis Tupas, Alberto Balatbat, and First Lieutenant Randy Tanghal, and Major Odilon Barrientos. Are formerly under the Philippine Army Special Operations Command, the Philippine Army Special Operations Forces distinguished themselves during the Siege of Marawi, which eventually paved way for the conceptualization, creation, activation of the AFP Special Operations Command.
Before you now is the Philippine Marine Corps Battalion headed by Lieutenant Colonel Romel Bognalbal. His staff, Majors Glenn Llorito, Miguel Perez, Romulo Dacanay, and Ronald Hagunap. A specially trained fighting unit of the Navy. Designed for rapid deployment, the Philippine Marines conduct amphibious and special operations in all kinds of terrain and in any weather condition. The Marines are known for their fine fighting qualities, endurance, and combat effectiveness. The few, the proud, the Philippine Marines.
Following next is the battalion from the 17th Special Operations Wing of the Philippine Air Force under the command of Lieutenant Colonel of Major Patrimonios Cesar Olmilla. Captains June Indaya, Ryan Pulmano, Richie Guerra, and Elmer Barcenas. The 17th Special Operations Wing conducts special operations for the defense of the Air Force's bases and installation and perform their role during surface strike operations as the Philippine Forward Air Controllers, or PFAC. Their transformation towards achieving an effective surface strike capability is stipulated in Philippine Air Force Plan Velocity, Book 1. Train hard, fight to win. That is the 17th Special Operations Wing.
Trailing behind is the Armed Forces of the Philippines Reserve Component Units under Lieutenant Colonel William Cruzana. His staff, Major Nardo Zambales, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Fudutan, Lieutenant Commander Roger Torres, and Major Manuel Racio Escaron. The AFP Reserve components are the standby operational reserve forces ready to fight when they are needed. They were tested lately during the siege in Marawi. Moreover, to attain a credible defense posture, the AFP develops operational ready reserve units which can be mobilized, utilized during wartime, national emergency, and peacetime.
You have just seen a segment of your armed forces pass before you. They represent our brothers and sisters out there in the field defending our freedom and independence, as well as our democratic institutions.
The Troop Commander Major General Pelayo R. Valenzuela will now report the termination of the ceremony.
Ginoo, tapos na po ang parangal.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again a big hand for General Carlito Galvez Jr. We would like to remind everyone to please remain where you are until the President has left the grandstand. Once again, I would like to remind everyone to please remain where you are until the President has left the grandstand.
Sa magnanakaw na tao, madilim na kahapon, ikaw ang mag-aahon sa piling mo, digong mawawala ang korupsyon. Tayo na, Pilipinas, tayo na magbago. Hawak kamay tayo para sa pagkasenso.
because I love my country and I love the people of the Philippines.
Ikaw at ako, tayong lahat kay Rodrigo. Together, para sa tunay na pagbabago.
Ladies and gentlemen, a big hand for President Rodrigo Roa Duterte.